Hello everyone. So this week you should be getting back your feedback for your personal narrative. And so I thought it would be important for me to create a video that explains some of the kinds of feedback you might see and some of the most common errors that I tend to see in my early students' writings. So the first common error that I see are either spelling errors or the use of the wrong word. So spelling errors, what I will usually do if I see a spelling error in your work, I might highlight the word, and then I will usually put a dialog box in that gives you the correct spelling of the word, but not always. So if I have something like a word highlighted and it has no other explanation, consider it's probably a spelling error. When I say the use of the wrong word, it might be something like the versions of there, and there, right? So there as in they are, THEY apostrophe RE, there as in ownership, their thing, THEIR, and there like over there, THERE, right? So sometimes people will use the wrong version of that, right? Or two and two, right? The number two, TWO, TOO as in also, or two as the preposition, TO, right? So it's sometimes stuff like that, or sometimes it'll be like a word that sounds close to what you mean, but it's just not quite the right word. Like for example, someone might want to say constitution, but they might have accidentally put continuation or something like, so it's a word that looks similar or but it's just not quite the right word, right? So usually, like I say, what I'll do is I'll highlight those. I usually try and give you a dialog box that you can pop out like on the side there, that gives you the correct spelling, but I don't always. If it's a word that I'm not quite sure what you meant or something, but it doesn't make sense there, sometimes I'll just highlight it and be like, address this. Okay, so then the next thing, capitalization errors. Typically this is the same sort of thing. I'll usually just highlight it. I'll usually put a dialog box and like tell you what the issue is or whatever. But more and more I'm seeing things like using lowercase I when you refer to yourself, like I want to go shopping. It should be capital I always. Or Susie and I went to the store, like the I there, even if it's in the middle of the sentence, because it's formal, it's like referring to you as a person, then it should be capitalized. I sometimes see too, like first names that are not capitalized, or the publications that aren't capitalized. So like if you say the New York Times, the New York Times is a formal name of something, of a newspaper entity. So the New York Times should all be like the first letter of each of those words should be capitalized. That's the same is true of like titles of books and things like that. So I see a lot of like small errors like that as well. There's a lot of like weird or missing commas. Usually when that happens, I will highlight the word right before the comma is supposed to be, and then I'll write out the word and put a comma in like the dialog box that's there. If it's a comma that shouldn't be there, I'll usually try and just highlight the comma, or I'll highlight the word with the comma and just say like delete comma or whatever. Okay. When it comes to numbers, typically you should spell out smaller numbers. So if I say I have won 2 awards, I see a lot of people that will just put the number. I won the number 2 awards. When they're smaller numbers like that, you should spell them out. So it should be I won 2 TWO awards. Once you get into larger numbers, so I would say like 10 or more, probably, you can start using the actual digits, right? So you might say, I have been in school for 12 years, right? In that case, if you wanted to, you could put like 1, 2, right? Depending on the citation style formatting, like so MLA, APA, Chicago Manual style, whatever, sometimes they have slightly different variations on when you should switch over from using the word to when you should use the digits. So keep that in mind as you go through class. Contractions. So a contraction is when you put two words together. So if I was going to say was not, the contraction of was not would be wasn't, right? WASN''T. Contractions are typically considered a less formal writing technique. So usually in academic writing, you should avoid contractions. I will say also in this class, I typically have word counts for you guys, not page counts, but word counts. So really when you put two words together, it's only one word, right? So was not, 2 words, wasn't is 1 word. So if you have a word count to contend with, and I know I'm not the only instructor that you'll probably have throughout time that gives you word counts, you're just basically stealing a word from yourself by putting them in a contraction. So I would just, try and avoid that. Instead of contractions, try and just spell out the 2 words that it is comprised of. So that is not something that I'm a stickler about per se. I do tell you that you should avoid the contractions for the reason that it limits your word count stuff. You're taking away a word from yourself to meet that criteria, for example. But also, there might just be like over your time as a student, you might find that there are instructors that just don't like them and they might mark you off for them. So it's usually just best to avoid them when you can. So here's another rule that is kind of outdated in my opinion. I won't necessarily mark you off unless it sounds really awkward or something. But there's another technical formal rule that I know in the past that over the course of my years being a student, I've been knocked for in my early years of academic writing, and that's ending your sentence with a preposition. Now, a preposition are words like on or around, toward, behind, over, right? So words that are sort of show proximity to something, kind of, is a good way to think about it. So there might be, so for example, if there's a sentence that says, there are 3 corporate boards that she sits on, right? So here, on, at the end of the sentence, that's ending the sentence with a preposition. So to fix that, we might say something like, there are 3 corporate boards on which she sits. Now notice here, one of the easy ways that you can find, now this doesn't apply to every sentence that ends in a preposition, but many of them, if you end your sentence with a preposition, the way you can find where you need to go to fix it is if there's the word that somewhere in your sentence. So in the example that I just gave you, there are 3 corporate boards that she sits on. So I would go back to that, and that's where I need to move that preposition to and arrange the sentence from there. So then it changes then to, there are 3 corporate boards on which she sits. Okay. Another example about this, I don't know who she gave the gift to. So to is a preposition in this sentence. Here though, we don't have a that. So we need to just sort of figure out where we would put. So if I had to move that to somewhere else in the sentence, we need to figure out where it would make sense. So in this case, it would be, I don't know to whom she gave the gift. Okay. So instead of, I don't know who she gave the gift to, it'd be, I don't know to whom she gave the gift. Okay. Again, though, this is one of those other ones that I'm not like too weird about, but it's good practice for you to try and not do it in my class, and I might still point it out to you, because again, there are probably going to be times that you have instructors over the course of your time in university here, and throughout your life, that people are just like, you're not supposed to do that, because it's kind of an old antiquated rule, IMHO, but you know, it is what it is. Okay, so the another thing that I tend to grade for, sometimes my students sort of phrase things awkwardly, where in these instances, what I will tend to do is I will highlight the phrase that I think is awkward, and I will usually provide you with an alternative way of saying it, or a more cleaned up formal way of saying something. So be mindful of that. Those are usually gimmies, because I'll usually provide you with something more formal to replace it with. Of course, if you want to take a chance at sort of rewording it on your own when I tell you it's awkward, instead of using what I give to you to replace it with, that's fine too. But I would just, like I say, just sort of be mindful of, you know, awkwardly expressed statements and things like that. So that's another thing that I'll quite often point out to you in your drafts. Something to keep in mind, particularly if I'm providing alternate ways of saying something, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll highlight that phrase, and then in one of the little dialogue boxes or whatever, I will provide you the alternate phrasing. But sometimes this is like in the middle of a sentence of yours. Like sometimes stuff at the beginning and the end of your sentence are fine, but it's just maybe a little bit in the middle that's awkward. So what I'll usually do is I'll do like a word or two. I'll usually do like a ... give you a word or two from what was fine, include my edit, and then include like another word or two from your phrasing at the end, and then ... So that way, you know, this like comes in the middle of something. If it's like towards the end of your sentence that is awkward, I'll be like ... one or two words from, you know, where you were fine, and then include like the updated version that I'm giving you, and then period or whatever, right? Same as if it's at the beginning, I'll give you the alternate and then give you a few of the words that go into the phrasing that was fine, ... and then you will just continue the sentence. So when you see those ... don't necessarily include those. Don't include those in your edited version. That is just me saying that trailing off, right? Like everything after this is fine, or everything before this is fine, but then include this updated language, right? So keep that in mind. Another thing that I see quite often in my students' writing are unclear reference. So what I mean by that is sometimes you might say something like, I'll never understand that. In this sentence, I don't know what that means, right? So you want to make sure that you make it clear to your reader, which in this case is me, what that is. So you may say something like, I'll never understand why Mary doesn't shop at Target. I don't know, whatever the case may be. Or it was never meant to be like this. So in that sentence, I don't know what this is. Like what, right? Tell me, because I don't know. It was never meant to be a party for Scott, right? So right, you just want to make sure that you're clear, right? Sometimes you'll say, you'll use the word it or that or this or something of that nature in a sentence, but sometimes it's not clear in that sentence what that it or that or this is referring to, right? Now, some exceptions to this would be, now, if you'll say, if I use that first example that I used, I'll never understand that. If my sentence, like immediately before that sentence, said something like, Mary refuses to go to Target to shop, period. I'll never understand that. In that case, the that there is very clearly referencing the fact that Mary refuses to shop at Target, right? So in those cases, it's fine. But if it's not really clear based on like the sentence or so before that, what that is in reference to, then you need to make sure that you take out that and put whatever, it is referring to in that sentence instead, right? I hope that makes sense. Something that I do want to point out in terms of this first paper, keep in mind that I provide a lot of feedback on your first drafts of the personal narrative. And on this paper, I am much more concerned, for example, about those sort of nitty-gritty details. So you're going to get back your paper, and pretty much everyone in the class is probably going to be like, oh my gosh, there are so many markings on this. Please note that is true for everyone. I don't want anyone to feel specifically picked on or anything like that. But this is a way for me to show you or tell you some of the things that you might want to look into or work on as we go throughout this class. Once we start getting into more academic works, I will probably move away from noting like every single instance of like grammar or like whatever, and start focusing more on your construction of the paper as a whole. Not to say that like my commentary about some of these things that I've been talking about here will go away, but I will probably focus a little less on them once we get into like our common reading experience paper, our visual analysis, etc. But in the personal narrative, because this is sort of my first interaction with you as a writer and things like that, I am going to be pointing at more nitpicky little things. So just keep that in mind. I don't want anyone to feel like they have failed as a writer when they see how many markings I have or anything like that, okay? I know that you guys are less adept writers than say I am because of my years experience, right? And I don't want any of you to feel like once you see how many markings I have on your paper that, oh my God, I failed, I like whatever. You will be fine. I assure you. For the most part, on this paper, I do grade pretty easily on the personal narrative, despite the fact that you probably have a lot of markings. So please don't feel defeated or feel like you have done yourself a disservice or like that you can't handle this class or whatever. You will be okay if you're doing the work and if you're consulting with me. I know I think it's a little bit shocking for some people. They'll be like, well, I thought I did really good on this paper. You probably did for the most part, but I am, in the first paper, I just kind of let loose and show you what things you could improve upon. But again, please don't take that as making you feel detrimental about your writing or anything like that. I know that you guys this class is meant to help you guys grow as writers. And that's why I point those things out. It isn't meant to make you feel bad or anything like that. And again, especially for this first paper, when it comes to some of these more mechanical kind of errors that I've been sort of talking about today, if they're really bad in your future papers, you might get a little taken off for it, but moving forward, they are kind of a secondary concern for me, but they are things that I want you to be aware of. Another thing that I want to point out is that I will usually only mark a specific kind of error once or twice in your paper, and then it falls on you to make sure you examine the rest of your paper to see if you've made that mistake more times. So if, for example, you failed to capitalize the word I in this personal narrative paper, right? I might mark it once or twice, but if you have not capitalized ones that are instances of I later on, you need to go through your paper and see if you can find instances of that need to be updated, right? sometimes will not mark every single instance of a specific kind of error. If I've marked it a few times, then I expect that you will go through your paper and try to remedy any remaining occurrences of that error, okay? When it comes to like commas and things like that, I'm a little bit more forgiving and I mark more of those. But if it's like something very specific, like you were using contractions or you put prepositions at the end of a sentence, right? I mean, like, again, those are like slightly less concerning to me anyways, but I might like highlight it once or twice or point it out to you, but then you should go through the rest of your paper and try and remedy that issue throughout, okay? Trying to think if there's anything else you need to know. So those are the most common errors that I usually find in early papers. That doesn't mean that there aren't other things that I might point out to specific students, things like that. But those are some of, again, the most common. So if you have questions about any of these things, please let me know. I will try and make sure to get back with you. You can use Microsoft Office Teams. You can come to my office hours. You can make an appointment with me if you can't make it to my scheduled office hours. Or you can just, send me a message on our chat or through Microsoft Office Teams chat. And I can try and get back to you within 24 hours or so. I don't know. There are a lot of different options. So don't be afraid to let me know if you have questions about some of those things. Make sure that you do go through the feedback that I give you. I think one of the worst things that you can do is just ignore all the feedback that I give you. One of the things that I take the most time in doing as a teacher is providing feedback to you as students. Like, I spend an inordinate amount of time making corrections on your papers and pointing out, and giving advice on how to fix things and whatever on your drafts. So one of the worst things you can do, in my opinion, is just ignore those things. I don't know how many times in the past that I've pointed out like a bunch of different things that need to be fixed or should be fixed. And then students just turn in papers with none of the things I pointed out fixed, which is very frustrating for me. And so just don't frustrate me like that, please. That is one of the things that is probably going to be the most annoying to me if you don't fix anything that I've pointed out to you. So just fix them. Like, most of the time I literally give you the fix in the dialogue boxes or whatever. So it's literally just you fixing exactly what you need to fix, how I told you to fix it. So please don't ignore those things. I don't just do it for no reason. It's to help you make your paper better. So please make sure that you actually look at my feedback, take it into account, and apply it. Okay. But again, if you have questions about my feedback, whatever, just let me know. I also have provided, there is a video, I believe in week 1 folder, but maybe week 2, that explains how to access feedback on your drafts in Blackboard. So make sure that you've watched that too, so that way you know how to access that feedback. I should have your feedback on your personal narrative or draft no later than Monday or Tuesday of week 2. So make sure that you keep that in mind. You should have your first tutoring session with your Writer's Workshop tutor in week 2, and this is that personal narrative. The final draft is something that you can work on with your tutor. Depending on when you schedule that session with your tutor, you may or may not have my feedback, but your tutor should still be able to help you through some of the more obvious issues with your paper, like on the surface and things like that, maybe organizationally, whatever. Okay. So yeah, I guess with that, I will just say thanks for watching and let me know if you have any questions, and I'm sure you'll be seeing my face in another video soon. All right.